Hello everyone. Welcome to the SIGUCCS webinar, Women in Higher Education Information Technology Careers. I'm very pleased to be working with Vicki Rogers, who is passionate about developing people, customer service, and milkshakes. She is a lifelong learner. She has a bachelor's degree in management and a master's degree in business education, and she's very close to earning a doctorate in adult education. I've had the opportunity to work with Vicki before, and she's great, so I hope you'll enjoy this webinar. Before I turn it over to her, though, I just want to make sure you all know this is being recorded, and if all goes well, it will be available on the SIGUCCS website in just a couple days. Also, by default, you are muted. So if you have a question, just chat that into me, and I'll let Vicki know when we have some questions that present themselves. So with that, Vicki, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to do this today. I really appreciate SIGUCCS. It's become an important professional organization for me and has helped me a lot in growing and developing. So I'm really excited to present today. I will tell you up front, this is my first webinar. So, well, my first webinar without a camera. So I feel a little strange talking to my computer screen, but I'll keep going until you guys stop me and we'll just do the best we can. So first off, I did not know how much of an introduction I would get, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself just so you know I'm not talking out of the blue. I am the mom of two girls, ages 17 and 19. My oldest is a freshman at the University of Georgia, go Dogs. And I have been married to the same man for 25 years, which in and of itself I think speaks to my success. In the career realm, I spent 10 years in banking. Did a variety of things in banking, mostly management. And I've just ended a gig with the university system in Georgia where I've worked 12 years in IT. I'm Southern, if you can't tell. I've found that my interactions with SIGUCCS don't involve a lot of Southern people, so my drawl is just an extra bonus for you today. I did stall in mid-management at West Georgia and found myself really frustrated as an IT employee, as a woman, of where would I go next. You know, everybody talks about those 5-year plans, and I just didn't see a path to do anything other than what I was doing, and that was really frustrating to me. So as a member of an institution in Georgia, I was offered free tuition. So I just kept going back to school. My husband says I'm going to go to school for the rest of my life. That's probably true. But where I've landed is in a doctoral degree with the University of Georgia in leadership and organizational development. And my passion is really from my own heart, from my own place, women in IT, specifically higher ed. So that said, I confessed to the conference in the fall and to you that I sold out and I took a corporate gig about a year ago. I was offered a position I just absolutely could not refuse, and I've loved the experience I've had here. I'm currently a senior IT manager responsible for service management and the IT service desk. We take about 10,000 calls a month, and we support some 400 applications for 22,000 employees. So I was just telling Beth before we started this that I went from a really small institution, we had about 12,000 students, about 1,000 employees, to a corporate position with 22,000 employees. So I've had a lot of culture shock in the last year, but I still really have a heart for higher ed, and I'm continuing down that path. But I'm open to conversations about anything in IT, really, because I feel like I've just run the gamut at this point. So let's get started. Fun facts, just to get you all entertained. 20 of the 20 richest women in the world, all but one inherited their money from their husband or their father. And this is where I really wish we could have some audience participation, but I won't push it at this point. Anybody guess who number one is? Oprah. She didn't inherit her money. Men wore high heels first. Women started wearing them to look more masculine. Women don't have chest pains when they're having a heart attack. Instead, we have nausea, indigestion, and shoulder pain, so women, please be aware of that. But also, I think it speaks to the fact, and this is just my opinion, that women have chest pains on a regular basis anyway because our heart leads us so much. Now that's not research, that's just my thoughts. Our hearts beat faster than men, and we have more taste buds than men. So none of that has anything to do with what we're going to talk about today, but I thought it was kind of a fun icebreaker. So today we're going to talk about the numbers. We'll identify the problem. We'll talk about the reasons for the problem. We'll look at some related areas of concern. I'll ask you if it matters and tell you that it does. We'll talk about the barriers. We'll talk about how we develop women and some first steps you can take in your own organizations. Now, I'm just scanning down the participant list. It looks like female names to me. Oh no, there's a man, yay! And we're going to talk about male versus female names in a little bit and the assumptions we make. So please know that when we share this recording out, that it's good for men to hear this information too. It's not just a women's issue. I didn't even consider the fact that yesterday was International Women's Day. I wonder if that's why SIGUCCS had this as a topic this month. But
absolutely, Vicki. Absolutely.
Okay. So it was interesting to have that yesterday, to see all of the different really positive posts. And I would encourage you to Google International Women's Day, and there are some great YouTube videos from companies all over. I currently work for Amtrak. That's my employer, and we got a great message yesterday from our upper leadership talking about the importance of women in our organization. So it was really it was kind of a great preview to today. So the numbers. Women in IT are really interesting. There's just this really interesting phenomenon going on, and I don't know if you realize it or not. Women make up 57% of the professional employees in the U.S. That means for professional jobs, there are more.
Vicki, I don't know if you can hear me, but you may have an audio problem right now. Can you hear Vicki or not? Just please chat in the information. Okay, Vicki, something just happened, so it looks like everybody has lost audio at this point. This happened just a few minutes before we started. There you go. Okay, so Vicki, we probably lost about the last 20 seconds.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's so odd. I had no indication. Okay, so I'll back up. The numbers, women in IT. Interesting phenomenon. We're the only professional career that has declining women in the U.S. So every other career is gaining more and more women, and it's becoming more and more equal, except for IT. So it's kind of an interesting place. Those numbers continue to decline. We were at 41% in 1996, and we're at 25% now. Only 6% of all CIOs are women. So did it drop again?
No, you're fine.
Okay, good. If it happens again, I'll take my headset off and put on and just talk normal. So I hope you all saw Hidden Figures. It was a really great movie. It just really great movie. Talked about how women got involved in computing jobs, and actually they were called computers. The women in that movie were called computers for NASA. So very interesting stuff. Did it happen again?
No, I think you're okay.
Okay, I'll stop asking then. I've got a complex now. I'm worried. So I mentioned that I worked in Georgia, and I think that one of the best things you can do is show a picture if you wonder how something really looks. So on the screen, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm about to show you the Board of Regents for the University System of Georgia, and this is today's Board of Regents. Now, I don't know if you notice anything there, but it's a whole bunch of white guys. So not that there's anything wrong with that. They're all very qualified, capable, wonderful gentlemen. I've met many of them. They have a real heart for education in our state. But you can see that diversity is definitely missing in my state, and it is missing in a lot of other states as well. It's across the board. We just recently added the third woman. There were only 2 women for some time, but we've just recently added the third woman with the governor's appointment just in the last month. So so if that doesn't tell a story, I'm not sure anything would. So I started my research in late 2015. I sent a survey to all the CIOs in my state's public institution system. 20 of the 30 institutions responded, and we found out that there were 30% women in IT. So we were actually a little above the national average. We had one institution as low as 8%, and one institution as high as 83%. Now that institution is very odd, but 2 out of the 30 CIOs were women, so 7%, about the norm. We're going to be repeating that survey very soon. We have just added another female CIO appointment in the state of Georgia, but we're still at really low numbers, which is true across the board. So why is this happening? Well, the research in this area is lacking a bit, especially in higher education. What we do know is there's 2 reasons for the lack of women in IT. One is input. It means there just aren't as many people coming through computer science degrees. There aren't as many women entering into these roles. And the other is throughput, which means the women just don't stay. And I'm sure that all of you have observed this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the input portion just because that's not something we can directly control right now, but there are other things that I think we can help with. But just so you know, 2.5 men graduate for every 1 woman in STEM degrees. So that's our input problem right there. Less than half the, or just a little more than half the graduates of STEM degrees are women. So let's talk a little bit about recruiting. There are a couple of issues with recruiting that speak to why we might not be hiring as many women. Now, it's really interesting because I'm hiring right now for a mid-level management position. Now, this isn't in higher ed, but it is in IT. And I received 5 applications yesterday of internal candidates, and only 1 was a woman, so about 20%. I received 90 total applications from people outside of our organization for this position, and it's exactly the same. About 20% are women. So we just aren't seeing as many people apply. We're not seeing as many people qualified. So when we talk about recruiting, one of the things that we need to consider is biased language. And this isn't news. I mean, we've probably all heard this before, but research tells us that biased job language in an ad will really deter women. Using the male pronouns, and then saying things like best of the best, rock star, really, over the top employees, because as women we're taught to not be so complimentary of ourselves. So when someone's looking for the best of the best, we're more likely to say, that might not be me, and not even apply. Also, ads with just a laundry list of qualifications. There's research that says that when women look for a job, they only apply for positions that they believe they are 100% qualified for. When men apply for a job, they apply for jobs they think they can do whether or not they have the qualifications. It's just a basic thing. So when we see those laundry lists of qualifications, it does definitely deter women. And then finally, ads that don't communicate the meaningful nature of a job. Women in general want to feel like they're making a difference. They want to feel like, that doesn't mean men don't want to make a difference, they do too, but women want to feel like they're really, they're working for something important. The next part is the process. Referrals. One study found that 64% of employees recommend people of the same gender, and 72% recommend people of the same race or ethnicity. So think about that. If we're already overly populated with men in our career, well, they're only going to refer men to the positions. And then there was a Google employee not too long ago, some of you may have seen it in the news, who did an address book check on themselves. So if you have a phone close to you, I bet you do. Some of you are probably surfing Facebook right now. If you'll look at your phone address book and just kind of take a peek at how many of the people in your address book in your phone are men versus women, especially if you're carrying like a company phone that's just your work contacts. Now, most of the people in this are women, so you would probably also have some more women in your address book, but it's definitely a check of who are you who are you networking with in a professional way? So next from input is the interview, and several studies have found that men are more likely to be interviewed and women are held to stricter or higher standards in interviews. So it's something to check yourself on. Also, there have been studies that say that we interview or we look more favorably upon resumes or applications with male names versus female names, and that's both men and women. Having unbalanced interview committees, and then also questions of cultural fit from the applicant when they come in and they see a very male-dominated workplace, then a woman might assume that she might not fit in. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have been on every interview committee that has ever been. There were 12 leadership positions where I worked in higher education, and I was one of 2 women. So every interview committee, all I did was committees because I was that token woman on the board there. So you have to be careful of that too, and we'll discuss that a little bit more as we move on. All right, so the bigger problem in my mind, or the problem that we can really address, is the throughput problem. 80% of women in technology say they absolutely love what they do, yet 56% leave their organizations at mid-level point, which was what I did, and which is I've seen a lot of women do. They've maxed out in that mid-level position about 10 to 20 years in, and they say there's got to be something better for me, and there's nothing for me to do here. So that's something that we can really address. Women are 2 to 3 times more likely to leave IT. And the reasons they give are cultural fit, expectation gaps.
Oh no. Hi everyone, I'll let Vicki know that we just lost her again. It's interesting. I'll just keep talking while we're waiting for Vicki to come back online. We're doing some hiring right now.
We as women need to address as well.
Oh, Vicki, we did lose you. So.
Okay, let me switch to my.
And I say you probably have to go back 1 slide.
Okay. All right. That is so odd. Okay. So throughput problem. Women are 2 to 3 times more likely to leave IT because of cultural fit and expectations, organizational commitments, and even conflicts of roles. And we know that there's 2 reasons why we have these problems. One is organizational practices, and then the other is personal barriers. So there's things that organizations can do to make changes, and there's things that we as women can do to make changes as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So is it just an IT women problem? Well, no, it's not. You know that. You've all seen the movies and heard Sheryl Sandberg talk. Women in leadership make up about half the labor force, but they're only in about 5% of the top management positions. Now, this is outside of IT. This is overall. Traditional research around women is really focused on intentional exclusion, like conscious bias, conscious discrimination. But we're really past that at this point, and where we are now is what they're calling second-generation gender bias, which is invisible barriers, cultural beliefs about gender, and workplace structure. So I have a fun fact for you. I showed this at the conference, and it's the one thing people always remember about my presentation. So I've really built it up now. Are you ready? There are more men named John that run big companies than all women. So take a minute and kind of put that in your head. So there are more men named John that run big companies than all of the women. There are also more men named David than all the women. That's a pretty amazing fact, I think. So it's also a women in higher education problem. There are more women in college than ever before. 57% of college students are female. I bet you're seeing that on your campuses. Women earn more degrees. They earn 60% of the master's degrees and a little over 50% of the doctorates. But when we start looking at the faculty on campus, it's a little different. 26% of 26% of full professors are women. Only 23% of university presidents are women, and only 14% of presidents at doctoral granting institutions, research institutions, are women. In universities, women are less likely to be hired, less likely to be promoted, and they're paid less. Everybody take a deep breath. So the intersection is what I'm really interested in. I want to know about women leaders. I want to know about women in higher education. I want to know about women in IT. And there's really not a lot of research around this, which is great for me because it gives me a topic. But there's clearly a problem we need to address. Does it matter? Well, yeah, it does. A Gallup poll from 2014 found that diverse teams perform better. Men and women have different viewpoints, ideas. It enables better problem solving. A gender diverse workforce provides more knowledge. A gender diverse workforce allows the company to serve a diverse customer base. I mean, think about your students and your faculty. And then also, gender diverse companies really and institutions really attract talented women. Companies can't afford to ignore 50% of the workforce. So the top 5 reasons for gender diversity are a larger talent pool, that was interesting, improved performance, improved morale, that I spelled incorrectly, an increased ROA, which we don't necessarily see in the higher education realm, but that plays out in a different way that's equally important, and also legal protection. So what are the institutional barriers? Well, first of all, managerial relationships. You've all heard the phrase, employees leave managers, not businesses. It's true. Technical people tend to get promoted in technology fields, and they don't necessarily have management or leadership skills. I feel like I heard a little bit of an amen out there. So one of the things that we need to think about is that we are promoting and encouraging leadership that may not necessarily have the skills to hire, retain, and develop diversity. And so it's something to think about. The next issue is isolation, and it's something that I felt. It's something, I worked for one of the 2 women CIOs within the state of Georgia, and it's something that she talked about a good bit, which is a lack of role models, a lack of mentors, a lack of sponsors. The reality is that men network by, they go to lunch, they go have a drink after work, they go play golf, they go do things together, and that creates this network and this really support system for them to develop and grow in their careers. But when a woman goes to lunch with a male superior, there's a little bit of a stigma with that, in some places more than others, but it's something that we need to get past. How can we mentor other women ourselves? And how can we receive that mentorship in a way that will benefit us all? So another situation is the performance evaluations. 1 in 4 technical women report that they're seen as less capable than men. There's this double-edged sword of nurturing is a bad thing. I was actually told once by another woman, not a man, that I'm mothering my employees and that this was a bad thing. And yet the flip side of that is if women are assertive, they're bossy or bitchy. And it's a hard gray area. It's a hard line to kind of straddle, is how do we be who we are and perform the way that we're meant to be without having these 2 negative sides to what would otherwise be seen as a positive attribute. So one other thing is women's evaluations contain nearly 2.5 times the references to team accomplishes versus individual accomplishments. And this is true about women as well. We tend to, if if something goes wrong, it is individually our fault, but if something goes well, it's the group's accomplishment. And that's not a bad thing, but what it does in a performance situation is it takes away your wins. It takes away your positive and accomplishments. So from a promotion standpoint, we develop and promote those like us. So the men in our industry, in our field, promote and develop people like us. I was told a long time ago that people do business with people they know, like, and trust, and we tend to know, like, and trust those that look like us. So it's something we need to work on. And then competing life responsibilities. The reality is that women as a whole are more responsible for child care and household situations, and so they tend to be less flexible in their work situation, their work schedules, which can contribute to it. So, and part of that is because in a relationship, the man is more likely to earn more money. So his job and his career take first place. And I've certainly experienced that in my life and did take on much of the child care responsibilities because my husband was the breadwinner, as you would say. Now we've reached a point where we can start changing that because our children are grown, but it is something to consider. So,
Vicki, we did have one question come in.
Okay.
Nick was curious, do you see the stigma going away? And I think the stigma was related to perhaps, was it men and women, like if they go out to lunch together?
Yeah, I think it's definitely getting better, depending on, where you are in the country, depending on where you are, city versus rural. But it's still an issue. I mean, I think that for myself, if I'm seen out to lunch with one other man, that I feel I'm conscious of that. So it may be our own internal bias more than it is other people's, but I definitely think time will continue to correct.
And then there was one additional comment just from Lori, who eats lunch with men constantly, and people do frequently comment on it. Lori, I might have gotten that wrong a little bit, but. Vicki, we may have lost your sound again.
Both men and women. And this is a list they came up with. So I won't read it all, but it's very telling about the things that real people have seen in this situation. All right. So one thing we know is that developing women is different. A lot of times women's training programs or women's development programs have just been what some of the scholars have called add women and stir, which is kind of funny. It's like take the leadership program that has typically been for men and let's just put women in it and see what happens. The reality is that we develop differently and we need to acknowledge that and then we need to move forward with it. So this list is a list of things that are different for women. Assessment, training, education, of course we talk coaching, mentoring and networking, how we develop and we work, and then career planning. And so before you initiate a women's development program, I would encourage you to find out more about what specifically women need that men don't or what women don't need that men do. And so the really first steps for you, I don't know where you all are or where you're from or what position you're in, but if you really want to champion this cause within your institutions, I would say that the very first step in anything is to enlist your top leadership. You might want to share some of these statistics with them, or I'm happy to do a presentation. I'm not selling myself. I'd be happy to do it. And then educate those around you. One thing that we have to make sure we do in this cause is that we're transparent and that we're accountable for everything we're doing. And a lot of times, and I found this to be true in my own system, the leadership will say, okay, we need to have a women's group. Let's gather all the women and put them in a room and let them fix this. And the reality is that we have to, the majority has to be a part of the conversation and the change that happens. So make sure that if you're taking these steps in your institution and you want to see improvement, baby steps actually do make a difference. But be sure that, that you're educating the men in your department about the situation as well, and that they play a part in the championing of the cause. I've found that to be very helpful for me in my own system. It is great working with the women that are CIOs within my system, university system, but the men getting behind it has really helped us, and I wouldn't take anything for that support. So this is the end of my presentation. I do give a list of my references. A lot of my statistics came from the National Center for Women in Information Technology. They have a lot of great information that's available to the public. I would encourage you to go to that website and poke around. You might be surprised. I've also included a citation to my article that I published with ACM a year or so ago that has some of these statistics as well. This is a living presentation because everything changes all the time, and I feel like we're getting more and more conversation open about this issue, and bringing it out into light is the best thing we can do to try and make a difference. So I am at 3 o'clock, right about 30 minutes. I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Vicki, thank you. And everyone, feel free to chat those in. We do have kind of a comment, observation, and a request for help. So one of our colleagues has noticed that, I'm just going to read exactly what she chatted in. If I inquire or ask an employee about their performance or lack of performance or not aligned with their work responsibilities, their immediate reaction is to say that she mistreated me or put me down, which is exactly the opposite of what she is doing, which is trying to stick to the fact. But because I am a woman, then they try to undermine me. Any feedback, or how do you try to mitigate these situations?
That's a really great question, and I've actually dealt with some of that myself in my career. And candidly, I have someone that works for me now that I have a challenge with, and that's the first thing I hear is you're treating me this way because I'm a woman, and that's really hard when you hear that, and it's really hard for me because I'm like, no, I do all this research and I do. But I would say that the best way to address that is to make sure that you're transparent and that you're fair. And I would bring in, you know, another manager if you need to, or maybe enlist your HR department, just to make sure. I feel like sometimes we have to go above board to show that we're being fair. It's like do more than you think all the time. So my best advice would be make sure you're being transparent, make sure you're getting advice from other people and checking yourself, and when you're sure you're accurate in your assessment, and I'm sure you are, then stick to it. Don't back down. Does that help?
I think it certainly helps me. So thank you for that. Vicki, I was wondering, well, and I'll ask the audience two things. Audience, if you've had any new ideas come into you about some way you could impact your environment, I would love to have you just chat those in and share those out, because I think that would be really interesting. Personally, I was thinking as I can affect kind of the composition of interview teams, is certainly, I think, would go in the right direction to really think about that balance, right? Because right now I have two different teams. One is primarily male, another is primarily female. But to really make sure that there's a good cross mix when we're doing the interview process would be helpful and something that I could influence. But a question I have for you, is there a resource, like when you're kind of redoing job descriptions, posting them, or creating ads, any resource that can really help understand if there's a gender bias to those recruitment articles?
Wow, that's great. I would say refer to that NCWIT website. They have all kinds of resources there. And then I think it's always a good idea to just let other people see things and pass over them before you send them out. So maybe just have a woman in your department take a look at the application or the job description and make sure that they feel good about it. Sometimes it's just that simple of stepping away from it. We get right into it and we see the details and don't think about it from the outside looking in. So that's what I do. I have a great HR representative. She's very accessible and she's good at looking for those kinds of things, but I know in some of your smaller institutions you may not have that. So this is where we really need to build this network of women and network of people to run things by, and SIGUCCS is a great place to do that too. To just, at conferences I've made friends and developed relationships of people that I can run things by from time to time.
Great, thank you so much. Vicki, I'm not seeing that any other comments or questions have come in, so this will be our last call.
So I would just like to throw out there that my email address and my direct line are on the presentation, and I'm happy. I love this topic. I want to talk about it, and I'd love to talk to you individually if you have questions or things you want to talk through outside of this forum.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Vicki, and thank you for everyone who participated in this webinar. We appreciate your support and hope that through these webinars we can try to get information out there that maybe you wouldn't have had a chance to have access to in another arena. It has been recorded, so assuming the technology works, it will be on the SIGUCCS website in a couple of days. So feel free to share this important information with your friends and colleagues who maybe weren't here. And Vicki, thank you so much for the work that you are doing, and we wish you all the best in corporate America.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. All righty. Bye-bye.